allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Kim, if you would do the roll call, please.
Member McMorris,
Here.
Member Middlestat,
Here.
Member Huber,
Here.
Member Shell, Chair Gordon.
Here. All right, are there any late changes to the agenda?
Chair, there are no late changes to the agenda.
All right, our first item then is to approve the minutes from last time. If the group had a chance to look at those minutes and see if there were any needed changes. Not, okay. They were attached just later this afternoon. I did review them. I didn't see anything that was missing. Do you need more time, or?
I never saw them, so.
Never saw them? What do we usually do if members haven't had a chance to review them?
You can hold it over to the next meeting is one option.
All right, let's move it, hold it over to the next meeting, and then it is attached to today's materials. If you could just look at it before
Sure.
the next meeting, that would be great. All right, at this time, anybody who wishes to make public comment may come forward. Please state your name, and you have a time limit of 3 minutes.
Okay, just a note of, you don't have to be here to vote on whether the consent agenda, if you weren't here for the last meeting, you can vote on that.
Thank
All
you.
you have to do is approve it.
And Mr. Onslow, I know most of us know you, but just in case one of us doesn't, would you mind introducing yourself to the whole group?
Okay, I am a former mayor, and I was on the council for 16 years, and my name is Ron Onslow. I live at 1195 North First Avenue, and I'm here to promote an idea for the 15th and Royal Roundabout, or the Lee Wells, or the Wells Roundabout. Wells comes in on one side, 15th goes out on the other side. Royal Road is there. You know where I'm talking about. Mr. Wells and I, way back when, before we even built it, came up with an idea. The idea is that we would honor Ridgefield farming community, or the farming heritage. And here's an example of one of the things that we were talking about. And that is, we would cut life-size metal that would be able to be anchored and not stolen. I'm also one of the ones that was decided that we would have grapes in our roundabout, which has turned out to be a very interesting situation. But anyway, it's all right. We make a lot of wine out of that. At any rate, one of the things we would do is there's 3 corners that are available. We would put an old piece of farm equipment that we would not be able to be, stolen. We'd chain it or something like that, but we would make it secure. And then something like this would be in the roundabout, and we're talking about, possibly a woman with a bandana and a child with a deal, and like she's farming in the roundabout. And anyway, that's our idea, and we would build it, we would put it in, and we would if it's approved, then we will take care of it. We will put it in. But it's basically to address the farming community that we've had in our past. Many of you may or may not know, when I first became mayor, we were only 3,000 people. Now we're closing on 18,000. So we've had a lot of things, and the farmers were very instrumental in annexing the property all the way to 10th Avenue, which is way over by Dollar Tree. And I don't know where we are on time-wise, but there would be this type of thing. We would have it cut out, and we would anchor it in the roundabout. There would be a couple of other things that would be going back to the idea of farming in our community. And then the three corners would also have, I would have Lee Wells go out and get us some broken down equipment that nobody wants that would fit the farming ideas.
All right.
So anyway.
Your timing is great.
Okay, and if
We
you
are-
have any questions, I know it's not usually go back and forth.
Yeah.
But in the roundabout committee, it seems like you would have that. So at any rate,
Thank you.
we are available.
Again, really good timing since this one is about to be discussed, and we even heard advance that there was some interest in that concept. So thank you so much for bringing it tonight.
Sure.
Anyone else that would like to come forward for public comment?
Hello, my name is Alicia Hyland, and I represent Caswell Sculptures, and I'm an art consultant. And so I have tapped into your last segment online and listened to kind of where you guys are, and I would love to come and present some ideas for you, just to open your brain up of all of the different possibilities. So I am new to Ridgefield this year, and I love the whole farming and what it stands for here. I grew up on a farm, and it's just really special to me with the wildlife concept and the living next to a refuge. I would really like to keep that in mind going forward with what we present to the community. We would also love the community to be a part of giving back feedback on what you would like to have placed. So what the artist that I represent does is he does large monumental type sculptures that are all around 50 states or throughout the nation. So we've already been very established. He's already extremely well versed on how to have all of these placed. Also with the concepts involved, if you guys need any help, we would be more than willing to put forward multiple drawing concepts that you guys can pick and choose from different ideas and make your own. And so I have a couple different brochures I'll be leaving here with you. I did listen to the time frame of the turnaround of when you need these items placed. So obviously with sculptures, if you're casting from scratch, it does take some time to create that art. However, we do have some already created pieces that represent, in my opinion, extremely well, like what we have here in Ridgefield already with the wildlife. He specializes specifically in wildlife. He was the official sculptor for National Geographic already, and so he's well versed in how to create the ambiance of these animals coming to life, which I think is really cool and special, especially for our up and coming generation to kind of just be able to learn as you walk around the community. I know as a mom, being able to stop and explain and tell all about each animal and how they're from this region. And so I love that idea. We do have quite a few wetland items already molded, and so the turnaround time, like I mentioned before, is going to be a lot less. And so I actually really believe that this is very possible. Also, he's willing to kind of keep in mind about budget, and all the a lot of people are okay, well, with large bronze sculptures, we're talking, larger price range. However, because he's moving to this community himself, and our kids and grandkids are going to be a part of this community, we would love to give back. And we'd be willing to work out and negotiate some sort of a package deal, if that's something moving forward that's possible. We also have the ability to do laser cutting and all different kind of metal fabrications of all types. So if a sculpture itself is not really what you're looking for, even though I looked at the design concept of what was just kind of talked about and put out there with the middle large sculpture with the two surrounding ducks or birds or whatever you choose. we have pieces that already cohesively go together that I think would be really beautiful. So if this is something going forward you guys are interested in, we would love to send you different ideas and concepts to your email and really get full-blown design ideas sketched out for you that are possible, in my opinion.
Thank
So
you,
we've
Alicia.
reached the 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually,
Thank
a
you.
little over.
Thank you.
I do want to point out that this committee does not commission the art. That'll actually be a separate call for artists procured through the city.
Okay.
And I hope to get more information on that this week as to what we do moving forward with that center art that was the approved piece in there. That will be a separate component, but
Awesome. Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else that wishes to make public comment tonight? All right, and we don't have anyone online, I don't think, that's waiting, no. All right, I think that means we're moving to the business section of our meeting, and I'm going to turn it over to Chuck.
Okay, thank you. Kim, if you could pull up that one piece that we were just talking about. This will be the final, this is what council decided to move forward with based on your recommendation. Council made at their last meeting. So it does have the landscaping part and everything else besides the art, the metal art in the middle. The landscaping, the knee wall's actually in. If you go out there, you'll see this big monolith. That's actually the wall. And then the landscaping will be done by our contractor. We're working on final plans for this now, so that they'll be installing that over probably the summer and then the fall with the plants. There will be 2 lanes of cars. I know for the rendering it only shows 1, but there's actually 2 lanes through there. The art itself, as I mentioned, I'm bringing this up with our management team this week to figure out how that gets commissioned. So as we talked about, it's a, let's see, it was about a 20-foot tall piece from the bottom of the pedestal up to the top of the art piece. It might be a little lower depending on the structural capability of that pedestal to hold up when we have infrastructure underneath it. But I believe it's to represent a tree with birds being cut out as the negative space, and those birds that were cut out become those two or three birds kind of on the outside of the roundabout. So that will, hopefully we'll get a call for artists out very soon. And that's why I say I have to bring this up with our management team to figure out how exactly we do that. Because we do want to have that commissioned and ready to install when we finish the project in September. So that's what you have. And you notice it's mounted a little more than what you saw before in the rendering. You had recommended and council agreed that it needs to be mounted up so you can see what's in the middle and not have it hidden by the wall. Any questions?
I just wanted the reason we're able to move ahead and even do the call for artists is because this project's funded, whereas our other project that we worked on, we don't have funding yet for the art piece. Is that?
That's correct. We actually do have a little bit of funding for the 35th roundabout. I'm working through exactly what we can do with the budget we have.
Okay.
If we can commission the canoe and other art that's in the middle of that. That's a work in progress, so
Okay.
stay tuned on that.
Yeah,
and then obviously we'll talk about the next roundabout tonight.
Anybody else have questions? Looks good. It's exciting.
Quite.
Oh, so we're now gonna, sorry, you want me to make that transition?
Yes,
So we're now
sure.
begin a discussion of the roundabout at South Royal and 15th Street and Wells Drive. And Chuck is gonna start that off for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is what council has selected as the next roundabout. And I think with this one, we've kind of run out of roundabouts unless we want to move to a couple others that were put in with kind of a whole placeholder landscaping. Well, there's one right up the street that people have been talking about. But this one is the one we're focused on tonight. This is at South Royal, South Wells, and 15th Street. It was built, finished last year. And I'll just kind of briefly go through what's there, what infrastructure is there, and then we can start talking about what you would like to see in the middle. Why don't you go to the next slide? So this is the map that is a work in progress. I've been attempting to keep up with it as you've made decisions or made recommendation, council's made decision what goes into the middle. So the shaded box is the roundabout we're talking about tonight. Just to remind you that the ones just up the street are both highly landscaped roundabouts. The one that you talked about that's in the orange is the native plants with the center art piece, the tree art. Why don't we go to the next slide? So just to give a quick overview of the roundabout, it's about 50 feet wide, the center, and that's the amount of room we have for landscaping. Why don't we go to the next slide? So in the middle, it's a single lane roundabout. It does not have a knee wall, so this was built before we adopted that as a standard. It does have irrigation stubbed to the middle. It has a meter in there. However, there's no active irrigation that's working in the middle. There's also electrical conduit adjacent to it. We'd have to do a little bit of work to get it to the middle, but no, it does not seem to be a lot. It had kind of it says placeholder landscaping in there right now, and most of it is work to have the contractor that's still working on that middle and the landscaping to keep the weeds out of it. It sometimes is a challenging battle at best on doing that. Go to the next slide, and that I think is it. So it's a very quick introduction to the roundabout. I'm going to turn it back over to you. We've already had some ideas expressed on this tonight, and let you have at it.
So one thing I wanted to ask about is the size of it. It seems quite a bit smaller than the other ones we've worked on. Is it significantly smaller or just a little bit smaller in terms of the center?
It's a little bit smaller. This is what we'll call our kind of a collector style roundabout. The ones that are on Pioneer, that used to be a state highway, and it's 2 lanes, and so they're much more prominent. What goes into the middle. This one is more of a side street roundabout.
Well, I know we had heard that there was a farming concept that might get applied to this roundabout, which is, I think, very much kind of in line with conversations we've had about trying to vary the styles of the roundabouts and celebrate different parts of our heritage. But I'm interested to hear what the 3 of you are thinking about, what might go here, or the proposal we even heard tonight from our former mayor.
I had a couple of questions. Since it's relatively flat, is there anything being considered to do a small knee wall to raise it up at all?
We would have to put it in back of the existing, if you could go back to that presentation, Cam, there's a concrete ribbon around the outside, and then there's the truck apron, and then there's another concrete ribbon. We'd either have to put something on top of that back concrete ribbon, which we'd have to probably get a concrete engineer in to talk about if we can just anchor it to the top of that and get some protection there with that. Otherwise, it'd have to be put in the back, kind of with the Costco roundabout was, because the Costco roundabout was not built or designed originally for a knee wall, and then they actually put it back of that concrete ribbon that you see in this picture. with that. So it does make it a little smaller in the middle,
Uh-huh.
but it does provide that protection.
Well, my concern was, is if we do go with a piece of equipment and you have a young driver one day going careening into it, and it's nice and secure, might be a slight concern, perhaps. I don't know what kind of equipment you're thinking of. Mr. Oslo,
And yeah,
are we
we're,
thinking
we're,
something
right now,
larger or
we'll
not?
have a discussion amongst us, and then,
All right.
Mr. Oslo can approach us during public comment. We don't have that at the end, but he can come
Sure.
back to public comment, but we can, just kind of brainstorm among ourselves right now about it.
Yeah, so that was a concern I had.
Yeah.
Just about that, though I love the idea of having equipment and of course, honoring the farmers, et cetera.
And you're right, that we have had many discussions about protecting whatever's in the middle from
Mhm.
drivers. So,
Yeah, that was all
Kelly,
I thought
Dan?
about.
what do you,
I live near this roundabout, so I drive past it like almost every day. And so, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about what would be nice to have there. Because all of the neighborhoods around it are very new, when you look out at the roundabout, you just see identical gray roofs, like on all sides.
yeah.
And so I think it would be really nice to have some really tall evergreens in this roundabout to just add some organic shapes and break up the sea of gray rooftops. Since the other roundabouts on Royal, the two over by Rose Hours, are both currently landscaped with evergreen trees, I think we would need something additional to help distinguish it from those other ones, assuming we don't want to have just like 3 very similar roundabouts in a row.
Okay.
Another thought is that there's a walking path nearby, where people like to walk their dogs.
Yeah.
And so people will be walking past to this roundabout. So if we are interested or have it in the budget, we could maybe consider a water feature that would add a sound element that people could enjoy while they're walking by. Since we have the possibilities of irrigation and electricity here at this roundabout.
Okay.
I was also noticing it wasn't as large a roundabout and wondering about,
Oh, turn on the mic.
Try it now.
I was also noticing it was not as large a roundabout, so wondering, what you could fit into it. And I like this safety idea of, I like a central feature, and then particularly in a smaller space, so.
I mean, something large like those trees too might prevent a driver from wanting to drive through the middle.
Yeah.
I also live right near this, and I drive by it every day as well, and I'm really excited that it'll get some new beauty coming in sometime soon, because it's really been painful to look at, to say the least. And I like the farming idea. I have to say, I was kind of looking forward to this, and once we heard public comment, I was like, oh, wow, we aren't gonna have to think about design as hard. But I am concerned that the size of that roundabout is small, and the scale of what the farming thing could look like might need a bigger space, and I'm also concerned about its protecting it from drivers.
Well,
I don't know.
there's all types of farming equipment. We don't need a huge tractor, you could do something like even so, I don't know how old they are or what pieces are available to us. You could do something that is smaller, and have your trees there, have that too.
Yeah.
So it's not overpowering the space. That was one of the concerns I had too, that if you had something really large. But I do like the idea of signage. I think that is clever. And that's a statement piece too. So there's ways to do it. But I think the idea of breaking up the monotony of the roofs is an excellent thought. Because that definitely is there.
Yeah, you can see it in this photo,
Right.
especially.
Well, yeah, I live near there too, so
Okay.
drive
well,
by it all the time as well. So,
Kelly, do you want to come, do you have something to add?
Oh, I think I would like to get more information on the available farm equipment. How big the pieces are and like what condition they're in. I would just be a little concerned that we don't want it to look like it's a pile of junk. You know, if people don't know, if they're not familiar with farming equipment, you don't want them to just look at it and be like, well, what is that? So that maybe it could be either arranged artfully or given a new finish on it, or have a sign like honoring Ridgefield's farming heritage or something too.
I guess what I was wondering, Kelly, is do you feel like the idea that you're proposing is consistent with having this kind of tribute as well in the middle? Like, does that combination work, or does it seem like that might be at odds with the vision you were thinking of when you talked about the tall evergreens?
I think it might be a little bit of a challenge to integrate both because we have limited space, but it might be possible.
I do think that the reason it's that roundabout in particular was eyed for this particular concept is because it's close to where a farm was, if I'm not mistaken. Well, there were farms everywhere, so yeah, of course, but Councilmember Wells, I believe, had his farm right there maybe.
well, if all of this equipment that's being donated or looked at is in one place, maybe we could go see it. And we have a good sense ourselves. I mean, I know what a plow looks like, I know things myself, but
I think
versus, or get photographs of what is available so that we have a better idea when you take a look at this space. Oh, this thing's 10 feet wide by 4 feet, we have 50 feet to deal with. So you have a better idea to be able to actually conceive of where that would be placed or used.
Yeah,
or
I do
something
think
like
it's
that.
reasonable to ask for a more detailed, like, description and visuals.
Yeah,
Chuck, I want to ask you, do we have something about not having things be super tall in the middle because of some traffic considerations?
I don't know about that. I'd be a little reticent to put something like a really tall evergreen that stands alone in the middle because they don't like to stand alone.
No, they don't.
yeah, that is true.
And one thing, I was going to suggest a couple things. One is we could write a contract with the designer of this roundabout, PBS, and have them provide some, kind of like what Jeff did from HHPR, come to a meeting and provide some landscape architecture, support, like answering questions like that, which is more of a design question. But also, we have an artist on the committee, and maybe if Mr. Onslow and Councilor Wells could get a couple of photos I bet you could come up with some really good renderings, because you have a good eye to do that.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I'd be interested to see some photos.
I did understand too what we heard during public comment was that it was not only going to be aging machinery, but also some kind of metal sculpture that would be well solidified. So it wasn't only going to be aging machinery, which I'm sure they would be conscious of. It's in a public place, but you're right, we would need to see it. And I don't know if this was the exact concept or something similar to this, but this is pretty well developed too.
You don't want it to be too cluttered either, whether you get a smaller space and.
Yeah.
Dan,
Is
know
the
what it's gonna
sculpture
be.
to scale, or is it like that would be a large sculpture if it was to scale? So it could be a central piece.
Yeah, it could, very easily. Yeah, I mean, I could see this working just without the farming equipment, actually.
Just the bottom part?
Well, no, the whole, like this, with the horse, the
I
draft
see.
horse and the, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think we might want to go with either or. Either the historical,
I think he wants to-
I think either the historical farm equipment or
Or
this
the green
sculpture.
evergreen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, I
Yep, I like
really
that.
want to get those evergreens in there if possible. I think we can make it work, but the farm equipment needs to be large enough, or the sculpture needs to be large enough that people can see it from a distance.
I'm
And
just having a
so-
hard time picturing large evergreens with a farming, because that's not what you farm is large evergreens. So it seems like it's kind of at odds with that concept. So I think we might be talking about two very different concepts. I mean, stranger things have happened, we could combine them and maybe it'd look just fine, so maybe that's where the artistic part comes in and we see. But it's a smallish space. You're right though, if it's just a farming sculpture with maybe minimal landscaping, it's not gonna break up the roof issue.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's trees and things that have been planted on those streets. They're going to grow. So there's that aspect that will eventually diminish the size and the look of all those roofs. So
Yes.
there's that side of it.
Yes.
So it compensates.
Yes.
I am a little concerned that, again, that it gets too cluttered.
Yep, I think
And-
you're right. That's something to.
Yeah.
So just to go back to you, Chuck, you're suggesting that maybe we get a professional to come back and meet with us, or you're thinking maybe Kelly consulting with?
I was going to suggest a couple things, as Mr. Onslow came over and mentioned that their idea was to actually put the farm equipment on the outside. I have to look back, and that's where I need to get some professional help on that to see how those would fit. Because I
On the
think-
red part?
I think you're talking about on the outside and the green part on,
I think they mean these parts here.
Oh, in the corners,
Ooh,
kind
yeah,
of.
So
H-
outside of the
yeah,
roundabout
I don't
completely.
know what's there, because some of that
Oh.
is our storm
I see.
facilities.
Some of that's been,
Is any of that controlled by the HOA?
That, I believe, is, if it goes behind the sidewalk, it is.
Okay.
What I have to check and see if there's something that can go between the sidewalk and the curb. We have limited room to do that. I think one thing we could do is I could get our engineer back on board and maybe invite Mr. Onslow to come over and we can sit down and sketch something up. And in the meantime, if you're interested in kind of the sculptured art in the middle, the farm art going in the middle, then we could do a supplemental or a simultaneous work with Kelly before the next meeting.
If the committee decides that it doesn't prefer to have the equipment outside of the roundabout, is it still possible to have something if we wanted it in the roundabout itself?
Yeah, your scope is really the middle of the roundabout.
Yeah, right.
Going to the outside is a little out of scope, and I'd have to get some direction for the city manager on how to proceed in that case. But that's why you're here, is the middle of the roundabout.
There's quite a number of roundabouts that have something like this on kind of a wall and then something interior. You know, the college did that. You know, there's a few of those kind of. So I wonder if something like this could go on the wall in conjunction with the farm equipment, where the farm equipment is
Yeah.
kind of the focal point, but the branding came with a picture maybe, or.
And the new roundabout at Clark College has the kind of the letters in the middle. There are some, I think we talked about the La Center roundabout, and that's where Jeff Creel, I think, had worked on that. The one up in La Center at 4th and Pacific Highway, because I believe it has something on the walls there as you're going in the middle of the roundabout, and I think it also has walls on the outside to have something. So that is an option, is to have the knee walls to serve as your art wall.
I would also be interested in seeing what the farm equipment looks like.
Yeah.
Like is there a preferred piece that's being recommended or?
It seems to me that any piece of farm equipment that would make a lasting centerpiece or side piece or wherever it is, probably has to be treated in some form to make it,
Yeah,
you
maybe.
know, if it's rusted out, then maybe there's a artistic way to, you know, paint it or treat it with something, or maybe the rusted out look is what we want, but it just needs to not be like so rusted out already that it's gonna crumble within a few years. So you're right, definitely, I'm sure the council would also be interested in seeing actual depictions before they committed to that, so that's. Well, it sounds like I don't know, we may have done as much to start this conversation as we can. It sounds like moving forward, maybe Chuck is gonna get with, go ahead, you said you would maybe meet with Mr. Onslow and,
Yeah, Mr. Anslow, maybe Counselor Wells, and try to get PBS, the design engineer, under quick contract to kind of help design this thing. Not exactly an art rendering, but more of a design of how this would all fit in.
okay,
They'd also provide some of the landscape background as far as what can we put into the middle, because there was something in the original design, and we pulled that out because we wanted this roundabout to be open, an open slate for you. That was done a couple of years ago, knowing that we were probably headed toward a roundabout committee at the time. So I don't recall what was in there. I think it was just general plants. I don't even know if there were native plants at that time.
yeah. And then are we leaving it open for Kelly to separately pursue a separate looking design? Does that sound like something Kelly would wanna do, or just something that does just feature evergreens, so we can look at two concepts, or?
Well, I could draw up multiple concepts, but I'd like to see the farm equipment if possible.
Okay,
Well, the center roundabout is yours. I mean, that's really, I can have the engineer or landscape architect that was on this originally give some background, maybe talk about some of the structural things, like how big of vegetation can you put in this thing? Because we have to worry about roots, and we have to worry about what's underneath. I know there's irrigation underneath somewhere. And then just this is not really one of the large roundabouts, so the room you have in the middle for that vegetation is rather limited, so that also limits the size, the height.
yeah.
So are you going to then go forward to find out whether or not farm equipment can be put on the outside and then let us know?
Yes, I'll need to bring that up with my boss.
Yeah.
Because this is a little out of scope for you. I need to get some direction from him how to proceed on that concept.
Yeah.
And if we want to do it now as part of this roundabout and the roundabout committee, or if that's a separate installation that we just do outside of this, that's where I need to get that direction.
Okay,
I just think that if that goes forward, it would definitely influence what we're going to do.
yeah.
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
true.
So we would,
So
it would help guide us in that way if that's going to be approved.
yeah, we'll have our management team meets on Wednesday morning, so I can raise the question then.
All right, sounds like and we don't have a specific timeline on this one because we're not urgently trying to make sure we take advantage of funds that are available. Is that right, Chuck?
That's correct. There's a limited amount of money in this year's budget for the roundabout committee. Some of that we wanted to use for 35th. The other part can be used here, but there's no time limit other than the end of 2025.
Okay, well, that is still a time thing. But it seems like we can easily
us
wait.
it is.
Yeah, we can still wait till next meeting to come back and discuss this some more, I think. All right, moving on. I think we're at item number 3, roundabout plantings and maintenance discussion and ideas.
All right, thank you. So this is, we've had some discussion from some of the council committee members before, And the chair asked, can we have a discussion, because there might be some ideas that you can impart on how, what can be maintained, or how the roundabouts can be maintained, or what some ideas are about maintenance. I have invited our Director of Utilities and Operations, Ryan Thamert, whose group maintains the middle of roundabouts, into this discussion. Just a reminder that we typically don't have presentations as part of meetings like this, other than from staff to you. And so this is billed as a discussion. We know we have some slides, and I'll work with the chair to kind of facilitate that discussion on a slide-by-slide basis. As far as your scope is concerned, the roundabout maintenance is not within your scope. Your scope is recommending designs to council, but this is an opportunity to have, if there's some ideas out there, we'd love to have them. Ryan will work with Kelly and others as far as what can be done if there's something that comes out of this. So this is, we'd like to have this discussion. So that's kind of the frame of reference for this conversation. Why don't we go into this now? So I'm just going to kind of start the slide and ask the chair to kind of weigh in as to what we're seeing here, and maybe help you. You could then lead the discussion, or just suggest we go to the next slide.
Okay. So a lot of kind of what I'm calling traditional or conventional landscaping that we see around the city, both in people's home landscapes and in city landscaping, is often plantings that are pretty well, separated in space, so they're not growing close to each other. They're often kept very well trimmed to keep kind of a tidy appearance, and they can also be, covered in lots of landscaping bark, and to try and help with maintenance. So this is something we see used a little bit in some of our roundabouts. Well, maybe to some extent quite a bit, maybe in the one that's near the central one near Rose Hours, but I'm just trying to kind of identify a kind of pattern that's been used in a lot of our community landscaping. This is another shot that is actually taken kind of near Acero Apartments and Rose Hours Roundabout. And on the left side of you can see kind of some plants that look a little more wildish. But then to the right, there's these very closely mounded. And what's interesting about this, as I looked at this, was the plantings are all native plants, actually. Everything you're looking there is native. There's, I think, a vine maple, there's a shore pine, there's evergreen huckleberry, there was some blue blossom, and probably some other things that I'm not remembering. Oh, there was a flowering currant. So those are all natives. But on the right side of it, you can see that it actually got pruned as if it's like a traditional hedge planting. But an evergreen huckleberry is a native plant that would love to just grow kind of a little more freely than that, so it can provide habitat for birds and have berries on it. And but it was treated like we treat a lot of the plantings. It's just let's just prune it and keep it tidy and neat. But to the left, if I photographed that more, you could have seen there's one evergreen huckleberry kind of under the shore pine where it's kind of crowded. And what starts to happen on the left side is that there's enough plantings close together. There's no issue about weeds, because the plants are growing close together. They don't create weeds. On the right side, you're seeing space between plants, and you're going to see through that bark at some point probably weeds, or the necessity to spray for weeds, because weeds will come up on bark. So that's just another example of kind of traditional with a little bit of a native flowy landscape on the left. So the way we've been designing our roundabouts with the native plants, the concept, even though I don't know if it's going to be implemented fully this way, is a little bit where it would look a little more like this, where you have layered vegetation. So you have things growing along the ground covers, and then a little bit higher some grasses and some other shrubs, and then some higher shrubs. And what starts to happen is the plants are all growing together, and you're not going to have as much space for weeds. You're not going to have the necessity to weed whack, hopefully, or to spray things or put lots of bark down. but you're creating lots of cover spaces for birds to live and for pollinators to come in, pollinate and do their work. So when we planned the last 2 or 3 roundabouts with native plants in mind, the idea was to create more of this because we realized that through development, we're losing this kind of space for our wildlife, and we need it. So this was like the alternative view, which doesn't require the same kind of landscaping. You don't see any evidence here that things are being shaped like balls or pruned down. And this was just, it's kind of comical almost, but it's not. 2 years ago, when I was first really getting involved in looking at landscapes, public landscapes, and native plants and their use in landscapes, I came across this example of Oregon grape, which is a very often used native plant for landscaping. And it was in the Walgreens parking lot in Vancouver, and it was gorgeous. It was about 6 feet high. It was flowing with yellow flowers. It was all bushy and happy. And I don't know if I walked over to see if it had bees on it, but it should have had bees on it. And so I was really happy. In fact, at the time, I'm like, I should write to Walgreens and say, wow, that's a great example of a different kind of public landscaping, because it was allowed to do what that plant naturally wants to do, because evergreen Oregon grape wants to grow about 5 or 6 feet tall. But unfortunately, when here's another example of it. So it's a little bit more of a close-up, and you can see there's lots of blossoms for pollinators, there's lots of space for bird and insect habitat, and that is, again, what we have kind of talked about as we've designed the last 2 or 3 roundabouts with the vegetation, is trying to get a little bit more of this natural look so that we could support pollinators and birds. So 2 years later, this is just last week, I was there because at the time I thought, oh, are they really going to leave this? Because very often I see Oregon grape and it's pruned and it's hacked like a hedge. So no, they did not. At some point, whatever landscaping crew went through thought that this needed to be hedged more rather than allow it to grow to its natural height. What starts to happen is it gets woody then, because the plant wants to shoot up more shoots to compensate for the fact that it's been hacked at the top. Sorry. I know that's loaded language, hacked, but anyway, it was maintained. And if you can do the next slide, Kim, you can see that this is the amount of blooms it had 2 years later at the same time of year. They were both taken in April. There's hardly any blooms. There's lots of woody stuff. It's not as much space for pollinators and birds. And unfortunately, this is the kind of maintenance that often happens everywhere. And it's nobody's trying to hurt plants exactly, but it's kind of this way we've gotten used to doing things to keep everything neat and tidy, and think that we won't have problems with landscaping if we cut things back and stuff. But it does really have an impact on the birds and the pollinators when we do it.
Okay, I'll kind of
Yes, that's great.
facilitate now. So this is appreciate all the examples here. I was going to call on Ryan, who's had conversations with Kelly and their crews about, well, how are these maintained, and what, I guess, trying to look at the ideas because of like experience with trying to maintain the Wells and Royal one is just it's infeasible with the way it's set up. But the Royal and Pioneer Roundabout has a high level of I guess it's shrub or evergreen vegetation in the middle. So I guess I'll just turn to Kelly as far as do we have any native plant landscaping features that we can call on to kind of talk about what we've experienced?
We do have some, especially Oregon grape, but for the most part, they've been treated just like any other landscaping. We're often requested to go to parks and along roadsides to cut back everything to keep them off of sidewalks, off of fences, keep the site or the height lower for sight distance purposes and that kind of thing.
Do those requests come from, residents or from the city staff? Or, I mean, or I guess businesses, or all of the above?
All of the above.
Any other comments that people want to react to, kind of other observations? I mean, I would wonder, I guess, Ryan, if you think some of the appearance of what I've noticed in other pictures. Now, the picture of Oregon grape I'm showing here was taken in Vancouver, but I have a number of pictures of Oregon grape taken like in the brand new subdivision across the street from me where they put it in, and it's a miserable looking plant because of the way it's being treated. And I just I don't know, is there any like sense of whether or not it does tend to harm the actual viability of the plant in the long run because it's being pruned, like you said, like a traditional landscape plant?
I don't know that we've had a lot of discussions about it in the past. It's something that we can certainly look at. I have a background before I started with the city about 10 years ago. I was in landscape management for about 12 years, and I had a number of customers that I worked with that were going this native route, and it's certainly a viable option. It just comes with a lot of education and a lot of we got to tell the narrative why we're doing it and all those things. Another thing that I found with native vegetation is we have to make sure, if we're going to let it get to its full size, we have to make sure that there's room for it to do that. Oftentimes things get overcrowded because when they're first planted, everything's very small. And then as it grows up, it starts to hang over, like in the roundabouts, if it's hanging over a knee wall, we're gonna have to cut it back so that we have room to work around the roundabout on that truck apron. Any leaves that come off of the plants, while they're fine if they fall within the knee wall, they can build up like a natural forest floor. But if they're outside of, it's going to cause a maintenance nightmare that could be, because we can't drive the street sweeper
Right.
up on top of that apron. So then we're having to have staff out in the center, blowing it out to the middle, taking up the roundabout while we try to get all these leaves picked up, that kind of thing. So it comes with a more, an understanding of what size they will eventually be, or an eye for what it's going to look like, and not what it looks like on the day it's planted.
So am I hearing that if it's whatever comes out of this, because this forest floor concept is kind of new as far as middle of roundabouts. The idea of a knee wall is new as far as the middle of roundabouts. So if it can be contained within the middle rather than trying to spread outside, or something that blocks the ability to clear it, is that something that, we could kind of consider, take back inside and have that discussion?
Yes, I think so. I did make a couple other notes here, just some things to keep in mind, especially with the height of native landscaping. So if we're putting any structures inside of the roundabouts, our experience is people seem to like to drive through the middle of the roundabouts, especially in the middle of the night and going very fast. So inevitably there's damage that gets done to structures, or another type of damage would be graffiti, malicious damage. And our staff does have to go in and maintain that. So making sure that we have room to get ladders or scaffolding or whatever it is that we're gonna need to work on. If we're spending money on art, we wanna keep the art in good condition. But if everything's grown up, 8 feet all the way around it, and there's nowhere to put a ladder or anything, to that, it becomes a challenge for us on how to do that. And we don't want to then go in and rip out mature landscaping to get a ladder and, you know, that kind of thing, or have to hack back something. So those would all just be things we want to look at. A couple of other things, roots, if we're putting big trees in roundabouts because of all the concrete. You've probably all seen sidewalks get lifted by roots, those kinds of things. Also, any access to utilities. Occasionally there'll be, especially our utilities for the city, water and stormwater infrastructure in the middle of the roundabouts, a manhole or a valve can or something that we need to access. So if we create a forest or a canopy over the top of that, and we have to go in to access those things, we may have to cut back pretty severely to get access. So if we landscape with those in mind, we can mitigate some of that damage that happens by crews that don't mean to damage, but that also have another motive to be in the area. So.
Other members of the committee want to weigh in on this at all? Comment back to Ryan, or just on the general, like, ideas around, like, the plants we've used and how we're going to take advantage of the work we're investing in?
It would help me just to summarize what I hear everyone saying, is that we're looking at a plant's nature. What is its nature? And it's important when we're doing that in our design concepts for the roundabouts to then look at the structure, the size of what that plant will be doing in its nature at maturity. And then for you and your crews, it's important to be able to ensure that there's ability for people to move around, access anything that's necessary. And so the utilities that I understand are in some places, it's important to be mindful of that, roots, and what is going to happen at different seasons. I would add in that as well.
Yeah.
Because at different seasons, you're going to have different aspects. It's nice to have the leaves be there. Maybe that's not something good for you, depending on the structure or the plant itself. So that's kind of what I hear you saying, that we have to bear that all in mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Would it be helpful to include a little footpath through the middle of each roundabout so that workers can easily get from one side to the other? They like have a clear route to go through.
I think so. It doesn't have to look like a footpath, though. You know, we don't want to attract people hanging out there either.
Yeah.
But some way for us to move through it, I think would be very helpful. And then making sure that the vegetation is not uptight on whatever structures, art, or whatever that we put in the roundabout, that we have a little bit of room to work around it.
Do you if there's lighting involved, do you oversee that as well?
Yes.
I'm not sure there's anything available now, but.
Like landscape lighting?
Yeah, if there was landscape lighting, would you
Yes.
oversee? Then you'd have to be sure to have access to all of that and
Yes.
any irrigation as well. Okay.
Absolutely, yep.
So you need space around any structures to be able to maintain them.
Yeah.
And also you want to make sure that the plants are not hanging over the sides of the roundabout.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ryan, I have a couple things. One is, do you think that, I understand the issue around leaves that are blowing into, clogging up sewer systems and making a mess and all that, but do you anticipate, I don't know what your current practice is. I imagine sort of that when they're up there blowing those leaves, they actually do blow inside to blow out the leaves so that there's fewer leaves to come out later. So this whole florist floor thing is a little bit of an adjustment because if the practice is to get rid of leaves and the leaves are going to come out, or they fear they'll come out, then maybe there's blowing going on in places where we in the future maybe might try to see what happens if they're left to break down and become soil. Do you think there's a conflict there a little bit, or is that something you could address?
Yeah, I think two things. If there's a knee wall, like at the Royal Road and Pioneer Roundabout, the existing that's been there for almost 20 years, I think. We don't do a lot of leaf pickup there. You can't see it, so it doesn't generate a lot of complaints. We just deal with what comes out of,
Okay.
out in the visible
Yeah.
area. Other roundabouts don't have any type of knee wall or anything to contain the leaves, and they're very visible, so we do have to get into those ones. I think that
Yeah.
with enough education and discussion about it, it's certainly something that we can look at, is how we're handling leaves. We do have certain other regulations, specifically with stormwater, for getting leaves picked up off of streets, and we have to track that and do it on a certain schedule to make sure that debris does not end up in our stormwater system and
Yeah.
eventually in our creeks and rivers.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna say is if we're doing our job correctly somehow as far as the actual planning of the roundabout and the consultants we're using for landscape design and any inputs I'm having on plans or Kelly's having on plans or any of us, that whole concept of right plant, right place, so that we're actually picking plants that we know what size they get to, so that we're not feeling like we're putting a tall plant in a place where it's gonna be, one example is this canoe that we've got planned for that one roundabout. We don't want tall shrubs that are gonna cover up the canoe. So the idea is to plant some things that are small enough that you can see the canoe through that vegetation. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes great
Yeah.
sense,
So
and
hopefully
that's really, from our perspective, what we're hoping for is that consideration.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea of designing the middle of roundabouts, like what we've been doing for about a little over a year now, and having an e-wall is new. And so it is a kind of a work in progress. But one of the
Definitely.
things we've been starting to do is when we design something that looks really nice, or like a landscape plan or a median, we do run that through our maintenance group to make sure it's maintainable, low maintenance and low water usage. And so that's what we've been focused on. What this forest floor concept, pollinators and native vegetation, especially what we've just done with the middle of the Pioneer Discovery Drive, it's kind of a new thing. And
Yeah.
so it will be something that we will continue to evolve over time.
Yeah, definitely.
I did want to add one other note that I had made and I forgot to mention. One of the major things that our streets crew is constantly working on, especially along Pioneer and Royal, all of our main roads, is garbage. It's constant, we get that wind every afternoon, pretty much year round, and it blows things everywhere. So that's another reason they need to have the ability to move through whatever landscaping, so that it doesn't just collect garbage and then we have no access to be able to get in and remove whatever the garbage is. So just
Does
wanna-
it seem like then the example of a different, if we could go back a couple slides, maybe Kim, one more forward again. Oh, other direction. This one. Would something like that, do you feel like that would be too hard for your landscape people to work with something that looked like that?
I think the way it currently looks, yes, it would be challenging. If you got more of a canopy, then it probably wouldn't be.
More of a like tree canopy, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or just all shrubs, but you would still need to have room to move. Because there's a lot of places I can see, strips of plastic or chip bags, bottles, things being able to be caught up in there. And then how do we get that out?
So you think that's different than if you had like manicured, rounded shrubs somehow? It's easier to get to them or see them? Is that what it is, or?
Yeah,
I
so
guess I'm having
when they keep it very tight and needy, they're regularly going through with rakes. They're regularly going through as they're pruning it's sort of just a process that just happens with the nature of that type of intensive landscaping. They're just always moving through it, picking stuff out of it, raking, blowing. That's just part of that nature of that type of landscaping.
The landscaping that's in our roundabouts.
Like the Royal Roundabout, it's constantly the Royal and Pioneer, sort of that, hedges, and they have to keep it up, otherwise they get complaints that it's overgrown. So it's just like a natural process that they're going through. And I think the crew would like to have less maintenance intensive landscaping. What does that look like, I think, is what we need to decide, as a city, probably.
Yeah, keep in mind that Royal Pioneer, as Ryan said, it's 2007 is when it was built. So a lot of these, the idea it was built to be a landscaped roundabout, and so it has a different intent. The newer ones that you've been working on is where we're bringing in the native vegetation, the pollinators, and kind of keeping it natural. Discovery Drive are kind of blending in with the wetlands plantings that are going on adjacent.
That's why I'm trying to understand if Ryan's saying it's going to be difficult to maintain the roundabouts as the new ones come in because they don't look like that one, which is almost what I feel like I'm hearing, is that you don't think you're going to be able to maintain landscapes that are different than the one like that from Royal and Pioneer.
I think they can, with the thought that the types of plants that are going in, how thick it's going to be, all those things are thought of, and how in this picture, this specific picture, it looks like there's some open areas.
There's a pathway actually through there. You can see some stepping stones, so you could actually walk through parts of it. And you can actually, some of this has steppable, native ground cover on it. So all of it's really pretty walkable. You can walk through any of it, to be honest.
So, but again, if we're not going through this regularly with rakes and like we would a super intensive bark dust area, which is raked often, are we doing damage to the plants as we're, picking out garbage and leaves or whatever is accumulating? Obviously, some of that we want to leave.
Yeah,
but,
the leaves would be no problem.
And then also on whether or not small, like ground covers, whether they will be perceived as weeds and will be instructed to remove the weeds. It's just a conversation that we'll have to have.
And that's why I think that's why I brought this said I wanted to come to have this be a discussion for our group, because I think it is a change of mindset, because the perception of weeds versus what really is a weed, it is very subjective in a way. But I mean, none of this is weeds. This is all native plantings. So
right.
It was more just be like changing our approaches.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, we talk about this a lot when it comes to our major roads, is when you're driving at 40 miles an hour or 35 miles an hour, what your eye can perceive is much different than when you're in your backyard looking at a plant. You might be able to discern that that's not a weed, but when you're flying by at 35 and you just see green popping out of the ground everywhere, I think a lot of people immediately jump to, oh, that's a weed. We need to get the city to come out here. And
Yeah.
Do you think
Right.
this type of planting would, if it was like this, you'd get phone calls saying, that's a mess, clean it up? Or people would complain
I
about it?
think if there was no education whatsoever and we just did this,
Yeah,
yes,
You'd get a lot of
I think
calls.
we would. Part of it is that this is not consistent with other landscaped areas that, not saying one's better or worse, it's just outside of sort of our policy that we've been doing, which is naturally gonna get people thinking that something's wrong or off.
So I do
So
want to
we need
pull
a
us
happy
back
medium.
to this
Yeah.
This committee's talking about the center of roundabouts.
Yes.
So we're not talking about medians, landscapes, buffers along
Right.
roads. Those have a different vision, as far as, tree line boulevards, but what goes underneath, that's the ones people see.
Yes.
The center of the roundabouts, where we're headed with Discovery Drive and Pioneer and others, and this discussion is quite a different focus.
Yeah.
And so I want to bring us back to that focus because it's a good discussion to have, but just don't want to get it confused with how we do our other landscaping, which is a very different
Yes.
process.
Okay. I don't know, I mean, I think there are some additional slides, I'm not sure they're all necessary for us to look at, but would you wanna, because I think in here, I did kind of go through this, but this is something that maybe the committee has already talked a little bit about. I don't know if it's worth walking through these points right now. What do you think, Chuck?
I think we've already kind of covered the
Yep.
intent here with
'Kay.
these. I think what I'm getting out of this is we have kind of a new process, and that's this new idea of forest floor pollinators,
Yes.
kind of native vegetation in the middle of our roundabouts, in some cases blended with art. And that one, I think this has been a really good discussion as to what are some of the things to look for. I think I'm also hearing that, well, if you're thinking that we might have issues being able to maintain the new generation of roundabouts, maybe this is an opportunity to kind of feed that back for future use when you are recommending what goes in the middle as far as highly vegetated or levels of vegetation or things like even expectations. And I think this is a good discussion to have on that sense, because we're always willing to kind of feed that back to you if we're finding the reality is that it sounds good to start, but the reality is it's getting very tough to keep that up.
Exactly.
Love to be able to feed that back, so I think that's useful information for you.
And that I think also was just one of my thoughts, is that if it's gonna be maintained in a way where we have this concept that we've been pushing for, and we wanna see these happy native plants, and we wanna see them flourish, and we wanna see birds using them, but if, for example, they're being maintained in a way where all the shrubs are being cut in a way where the birds can't be in them, or if there's sprays applied to reduce weeds that actually hurt the insects that are using those as pollination, it's really pointless for us to be making such a point of doing this kind of effort if we're not working together to kind of problem solve that situation, because that's like, it's dumb, right? So that's why it was important to me, because I started to realize, like, you know what, how's this gonna go in a year or two if we treat every roundabout the same, and some roundabouts we've been blowing them, as you say, regularly rake blow, but we don't want that in our native plantings, and we don't want them pruned. We want them to grow so they can be habitat. We don't want sprays used. We need to talk about that. Otherwise, we should change if the city can't maintain it that way, then we need to change our attitude too, or at least our expectations.
I think there's a happy medium you can make. I think in taking into consideration maintenance, and not just that. I mean, the other side of this that I see is, what do you want to present to the public? This is our city. How do you want it to look so that when people drive by, they go, oh, wow, that is really beautiful, or that's interesting, or that's stylish, or that has flow from one to the other. It makes sense. So in looking at the native, I'm all for that, but I also think you need to be able to address maintenance needs. What is the public going to look at it? Want those bumblebees, be happy, but, maybe the rock would be better there and the plant next to it. So that's not, you groupings versus whole canopies. I mean, there's things to look at that you can adapt. You can have a little of this and a little of that, just works. I don't think you need to give it up. That's what I'm trying to say. You don't have to give the whole thing up. You
We
just
didn't really
adjust.
design to the level of where our manhole covers, you know,
Yeah,
and things like that. So I had figured that that was part of the implementation. Should there be some guidelines provided to support some of the maintenance constraints that would be useful to?
You
Qualify
recommend
the-
concepts, and then it's up to us to engineer what the reality of that concept looks like when we actually build it. If you recall, the discovery at Pioneer Roundabout originally wanted to have a heritage tree in the middle.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we went back and found, well, we got a big sewer main line right underneath it, and Clark Regional kind of didn't like that idea. But it is one of those that we need to have a concept to be able to look at it. If we don't have a concept, then we're just gonna have a bunch of boring roundabouts, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So I think that's where, you know, staff supports you in that, and where, like, we brought in Jeff Creel from HHPR for the last roundabout. We can bring in PBS on this one, on more of the engineering side of things, but it's good to have a concept. And the other thing I want to point out is we've had roundabout concepts for quite a while. We're unique in how we treat roundabouts. Sometimes we'll keep moving ahead with it. Sometimes we'll try grapes and decide that, all right, those two are it. But we won't know until we do it. And so that's where I think this continues to be a work in progress, that, you know, we will learn and we will modify and we will adapt.
All right. Well, I think, are there any other committee comments, or maybe if Brian has anything left to add to this conversation about the plantings and the maintenance?
I don't have anything specific. I just want to thank the committee for allowing, from a maintenance perspective, to come in and speak to you about these. And Kelly Melroy, our operations supervisor, or myself would be happy to do this anytime you have a question or would like our input.
Great. Done up here? All right, well, I think
Thank you.
that concludes our business section of the meeting. We can go now to staff reports. Mr. Green, are there any staff reports?
Yeah, as you know, I've got 2.5 months left, and then I am retired. And so we are planning a succession for me. I guess you can succeed me somehow, or they'll figure it out as they go along. So the intent is to have my successor on board by June 1st. We'll see how that works. They are going through a short list as we speak. So the intent is to have a June meetings, and June meeting, and that meeting will be the time where I get to introduce my successor and probably have more of a get to know each other process during that meeting. I will be working behind the scenes. The month of June for me is going to be a transition month for the city. That's where I get to take my successor and bring them on and introduce them to what I've been doing and who I've been doing it with. So look for that. The May meeting, obviously, we're going to come back with more information, try to generate more information on this roundabout, the Wells Roundabout,
Right.
before we come back in May. So we'll be continuing to feed information as it comes in. So that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
All right, thank you, and
2 months.
we're sad. We're sad we're losing you, Chuck. All right, anything from the committee? All right, I would say we did our business, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.